Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Great. We're on to part two. Hopefully everybody listened to part one of From Marv to McDermott, our show on all of the coaching eras in the last 25, 30 years of Bill's history that Don was a part of and I was a part of a little bit.
Sure.
And we're gonna pick up where we left off with the cliffhanger when Brandon Beane was going to be hired as the new GM, and Coach McDermott was obviously installed and had been there for a couple months.
It's funny on YouTube there. Somebody commented like, "How could you leave it like that?" And that was your evil,
right? Well, that's the light bulb went off for you about halfway through last episode when you realized where we were going to end up. Before we do that, I just wanted to talk about the two interim coaches that were there, for a little bit as the head coach, Anthony Lynn. Let's start with him or Perry Fewell.
Perry Fewell was the chronologically
correct.
The one that happened.
Did you feel like Perry Fewell had a chance at the job? Were you disappointed? Were you surprised?
We did. He ended up coaching the last 3 games of the season, and I think there was a feeling. There was no declaration that, hey, if he wins 2 out of 3, he's the guy. But I think we kind of felt like that would, given how good a defensive coordinator he was and how well respected he was in the building, that if he did win 2 out of 3, that probably would have put him in the lead. He still had to interview other coaches.
Right. Is it awkward in the building when there's an interim head coach? Because there's like you said, there's like this unwritten expectation or rule or whatever. Like, how awkward is it?
It is because, you look at them and everyone knows they're there by default.
Right.
Did
they get a bump in pay for those 3 games?
I think so. That's a heck of a question. I would have to believe they would have gotten a proportion of, that's a great question. I wasn't involved with the coach's pay, like for a head coach. I saw some contracts, but it's such a unique situation that I would like to think they gave him a bump.
Okay. We can find that out.
Yeah. Somehow I can find out.
Okay,
but
please do. Please do, and we'll leave it in the comments because I genuinely am curious to know that.
Yeah, right.
Like, do you get $50,000 more a game or something? Because I mean, you are taking on quite a bit more responsibility.
You would think like the players are paid their contracts for every week. They're paid 1/17 of that. Now it's 18. The buy counts, but you would think an interim coach, if he was there, in Perry's case for 3/17, that he would get 3/17 of what the previous head coach was being paid, even though you're also paying that head coach still because you fired him. But
interesting. We'll find that out.
Yeah.
So you felt like he might have had a shot.
Yeah.
And it just didn't.
I think we lost all 3 games. Someone can look that up. And they were games that we were in every game, and it was like, oh, come on. It's just, it would have been nice to it would have been nice to know at the end of the year that it was likely that you knew who your head coach was going to be the next year, and this as well as anyone, for everyone on that staff, they feel like if Perry's successful, he's the guy. He's likely to keep all of us.
Yep.
If not, it's going to be a blow up situation, which it was.
Okay, Anthony Lynn, similar situation.
Very similar.
Okay,
very similar. He came to my office as soon as he was named, the interim head coach, and he said real quick, it wasn't, he was studying film and doing everything a head coach does, but he was like, hey, sometime in the off season, I want to talk to you about how we handle the road games.
So assuming he was going to be the guy,
he was leaning into it in a way that he felt, he had an impressive NFL career and coaching career. He ended up being a head coach, as everyone knows, where the Chargers had one good year, and then
it got a little rough
apart. That next year, but yeah.
Okay, so both times, kind of one of those where, hey, maybe if we catch fire the last 3 games, there's a shot that this guy will be able to take over, and everybody inside the building is kind of rooting for the interim head coach, right?
For him and for themselves, for continuity,
right? Okay,
so self-preservation. Yeah.
So Anthony Lynn gets let go,
and
then Coach McDermott comes in. And then we, kind of let it go where, Doug Whaley got let go as the GM. We're going to address that in our part 3, which will be Bill Polian to Brandon Beane. Just a look at all the general manager eras in the last 30 years of Bill's history, which there were quite a few of. So take me through, Brandon Beane comes in the day he's hired. You said, you knew him. You had some interactions with him previously.
A little bit.
Where's your head at?
I was, as you alluded to, what did you feel like? What was your confidence level? It was high because I was told, when Sean McDermott came in January, he's our new coach. The owners love him. He's going to be the face of the franchise. I worked very closely with Sean. Barb Evans and I did, moving all the coaches. When we talk about the relocation of the coaches, it sounds easy, but every coach, you have to get 3 bids for their moving company, 3 bids for you to move their vehicles. There's tax implications. You have to keep them. You don't want them to have any surprises because certain things that they get are taxed because they would have otherwise had to pay for them themselves. So there's a lot of interaction. And, Sean McDermott told me that he really appreciated how I handled his coaching staff. Unfortunately, I had far too much experience doing that.
Right. You likely were the most experienced person in the NFL when it came to relocating coaching staffs. Yeah, that's probably fair, right?
That's not fair. That's not a good thing.
No, of course not.
It's probably true.
So so how unique was this situation? So we're in what, May of 2017.
Okay, yeah, and Sean's been there 4 months.
We have a head coach who's been there for 4 months.
Yeah.
And now we fire the GM.
Which was shocking, and I think we left off in the last episode that Saturday night of the draft, I saw Kim, Terry, Pagula, Sean McDermott, Doug Whaley, and Jim Mona sitting at the table laughing, drinking wine.
I had more than one person appreciate my Maury from Goodfellas reference.
Yeah, that was good.
I don't know
that was
if
funny.
We ever do talk to Doug Whaley.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he would appreciate it or not, but it just kind of felt like that's what happened, right?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. So the next morning, Jim texted me, called Jim Overrook, that is. And I think I went in later in the day, and I didn't think of this at the time, but Jim said something to the effect of, it's going to be a tenuous situation. As a general, just be ready for anything.
Sure.
But I didn't think much of that.
Well, you've been there now,
right?
25 plus years,
right?
And you've survived seemingly more risky, full regime change,
right?
Like new GM, the owner stepping back. You've survived everything.
And 50% of this new regime is already in place.
And you've had a good relationship with him now for months, not for a week or 2 weeks. It almost feels like in the NFL, if you can get through like the end of February, you're probably okay, right? For that year. Is that kind of the way it's looked at still?
Yeah, for the most part, unless you're a scout, because what happens is that, as you know, Josh, the scouts have all this intellectual capital. They've been studying the draft picks all year. You'd be crazy to fire your scouting staff in February with the draft coming up in April.
Their calendar is like 3 months behind like the rest of the front office. But you had to kind of feel like, when Coach McDermott comes in, you're his point guy to get this entire thing, his entire staff here. You're having a good relationship. And it kind of felt like he was making the call on the GM, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was clear that he was part of, if not making the call himself, he had a disproportionately high voice, more so than another head coach would have had. And so when, Sean McDermott coming from the Carolina Panthers, when it was announced that after the firings that it wasn't right away, it took a few weeks before they did interviews, and Brandon Beane, won the job. They were very impressed with him, and it didn't hurt that he had this previous relationship with Sean.
So you don't feel like it was a fait accompli that it was his job all along?
No, I figured he would have been in the lead, but I have a feeling they were open to other things. But it was his job to lose.
Okay, sure.
And he didn't. And so I'm thinking, all right, I know what Sean has told me he thinks of me, so I would.
And you are the most experienced. That's hilarious. I hadn't even ever thought of that, but you've moved more coaches than maybe maybe not in league history. There's no way to know this, but you've got to be top 5 of people who've relocated coaches in NFL history.
Well, we were talking about the drought the other day, Josh. You and I were. It was just so frustrating, and spoiler alert, we did talk to Lee Evans, and he was talking about some of the teams. I don't know if that's going to air before this one comes up or whatever. It's no matter when it airs, you're going to love it. But Lee talking about some of the teams he really thought were going to be playoff teams. And okay, so that episode we just did showed there were 8 different head coaches during all that time, like every 2 or 3 years. The New England Patriots had one head coach and one quarterback the whole time, and they were just dominant. And if we're in another, it's a hypothetical, but if you're in another division, you probably make the playoffs some of those years, and you never know what happens. But it wasn't the case. So, yeah, too many regimes came through.
So Brandon gets hired, and your first interaction with him in the building is what?
Now, normally I would have met the GM on day one.
Okay.
They would want to know from me how the relocation works, and end up working with their family. It was like 4 days before I met Brandon Beane. So I knew him a little bit from when he was the travel coordinator with the Panthers, and I was doing some with the Bills. And I don't know, maybe at a labor seminar in Dallas that we went to every year. I can't remember, but we were at least vaguely familiar. He was on this path of clearly about to be a GM. I think he was assistant GM. So, but I was feeling good about it, but I was a little curious as to why it was a few days had gone by before I met him, because his assistant GM, Brian Gain, and Joe Shane were in the building, and I was talking to them already about some things. And so Barb Evans, as the HR, now VP, congratulations, Barb. She was the director at the time. She would be someone that they would meet with on day one also. So finally, Barb told me, hey, Brandon's going to be here tomorrow. Obviously, he's super busy and making this adjustment, first time GM. I understood. I had no issues with it. I knew we'd get to talk to him. I just wanted to help him with some of these things I knew he'd want to talk about. So she says, tomorrow morning at 11, we're going to meet with Brandon, Joe Shane, and Brian Gain. And great, we'll talk to them all together. We know they're busy. We'll be quick. They're smart. We'll get right to the point. So
1 out of 10 on the fear scale?
Yeah, one or two.
Okay.
Yeah, low.
Yeah,
very low.
Yeah.
So there's a table. Ironically, I think it was the same table that Kim and Terry, they were all at. It was in the scouting office. I think it was the same table, but I didn't.
It was like the car. You were in the same seat Maury was in.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But it didn't seem ominous to me. It seemed routine. And Joe and Brian had a lot of questions. Brandon came in, his phone kept ringing, and I didn't have a lot of interaction with Brandon Beane. It was quick. We made our points. We gave him some documents, and when it was over, I said to Barb, I found it a little curious that he didn't ask me any questions. Didn't say, hey, I know you're also director of football administration. What else do you do? Wasn't curious
about you at all.
No.
Okay.
And but I didn't think much of it, because then all the rookies came in after the draft, and Barb and I and her staff, we got all the rookies acclimated. We got them signed up to be paid and workers' comp, all that stuff. And I said to her, we were in the training room, I said, I still don't know how I feel about how that meeting went. And she goes, "Oh, Don, stop! You're fine. Everything's no worries."
And you had done this a lot of times before.
Yeah.
So now we're at maybe a 4 or 5.
It was creeping a little bit, but then she kept it capped for me. And then I had an interaction with Brandon. There was a scout that they let all the scouts go, but they were going to interview all the former scouts.
Oh.
And you're making me think of stuff I hadn't thought in a while.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I got offered a interview for back in the merchandise department after I got fired. So sorry. Go ahead.
Well, there was a scout named Marcus Cooper who was on our staff that had interned for me and for Paul Lancaster, and he had just gotten to be a scout.
Okay.
And he was good, and when he worked for me, everything he did was right on. It was always above and beyond. So I emailed Brandon, Joe, and Brian Gain, and I said, I know you're interviewing scouts. For whatever it's worth, when you interview Marcus Cooper, I just got to tell you, everything I just told you,
sure.
he above and beyond. I just hope that for whatever this is worth, that you give him a look.
You did him a solid.
And they kept him.
Wow.
They kept him. And Brandon emailed me. He's like, yeah, we're happy. We're going to keep Marcus. And so I thought, okay.
Hey, your opinion matters. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So now now it's going down like, the 1
2
or 2s
3.
again.
Okay. Yep.
So Memorial Day weekend comes, and in the NFL, as you know, Josh, we don't get really any fall holidays except for maybe Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day if you're not playing. So all the weekends you're working. So on the back half, they try to give you some time, like for Memorial Day, not Monday. You'll get Monday. You also get Friday.
Sure.
You'll get a couple days.
Yep.
So it was a long weekend. There's not a whole lot going on in the building. And that day happened. So Tuesday morning after Memorial Day, I was in my office and I got a call from Jim Overdorf. It was, I don't know, 10 minutes to 9 or something like that.
The Grim Reaper.
Well, I didn't know. Yeah, I worked directly for Jim for all these years. And, hey, Don, can you stop down? So, yeah, sure, I'll be right there. So I go down to his office, and then he's got his desk. He was at his desk, and there's 2 guest chairs. You've been in that hot seat too.
Sure have. Sure have.
Yeah. So there's a lot of references here, but Brandon was in one of them.
I wasn't big enough to have Tom Donahoe in the other chair. It was just me. It was just me and Jim. I didn't warrant having the GM of the team next to me.
Well, not only was he next to me, he had a message for me.
Did you know?
No.
When he was in the chair, when you walked in the room, you didn't know.
I still didn't know. I still didn't know. He asked me to shut the door.
Okay.
And I thought, again, it had been like 4 days I just thought he wanted to. I never had an interview. I just thought, okay, now's the time. He just wants to kind of talk to me about what I do.
Sure.
Talk about maybe a different vision he had for the football department and how I might fit in, how maybe there's some duties might be shuffled around.
Didn't see it coming.
And I would have, if I was a GM, maybe I would have thought to say, hey, let's get to know these guys. What can they do? I want to maybe get the best out of everybody. I probably am going to have some new people come in. How are they going to mesh?
Continuing the Goodfellas reference, you're Tommy thinking he's going to be made. Opens up the door and it goes, oh no, and then gets shot in the back of the head. So similar, because you have no idea, right?
I had no idea.
No idea.
I should have, but again, having survived all these other ones,
and you're in Jim's office, which is friendly territory. You've been in there a million times.
Sure,
you've been in there for Interesting they called you into Jim's office and not into Brandon's office.
I'm sure they had the reasons. I don't know, but Brandon was there. It was his show, and he said, Don, I just need to let you know that you've been here a long time, got a great reputation around the building, but we're gonna go a different direction, and we're letting you go. And it took a while for those words to sink in. It was like a pause. But he said, I want to let you know Barb Evans is going to come in here, and we're going to take care of you financially in a way that we think is worthy of your time here. And I think, okay. I didn't know what to say. He said, do you have any questions? And Barb had come in at that point. They shut the door, and I just said, is there anything different I could have done? And they're like, no. Which Brandon wouldn't have even known really what I did, except what I found out later after Brandon left. And I just said, well, I got to tell you, working for Sean McDermott over the past 4 months has been one of the great privileges. I think the world of him. I'm going to be rooting for him. But okay, hey, it's your show, and I wish you the best. And so he left, and it was just Jim and Barb and I. And Jim was visibly upset. He said, Don, I'm so sorry. He goes, I want to let you know what happened. He said, they called me. I was home on that Friday that we were off. They told me what they were thinking of doing. And I said, hang on, I'm going to come in. So then he said he went into the building and made a plea for them to keep me, saying, look, he does a lot of things that for the team that are under the radar. And I just want you to know that and consider that before. And they still went ahead and made the decision despite, what Jim said. And so then I'm like, wow. And
how long is this entire interaction in his office? 5 minutes?
15.
15? Okay.
It was 5 with Brandon and another 10 in there, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, what's next? And he said, well, you got to talk to security. We talked to Chris Clark, and because I had a credential, and to talk about how I would leave. And so I talked to Chris, and he said, Don, take all the time you need. And I said, so my office was on the other side of the building, and there was an entrance there that was really only for players. Mm-hmm. And I said, is it okay if I park my car near there? I would have never otherwise used that as an entrance or exit, but he's like, absolutely. I said,
it's the end of May. There's nobody really around, right?
Well,
I was with the player's not around.
They were.
Oh, they were. Oh,
during OTAs, it's like right now.
Oh God.
Yeah,
okay.
They were around. All so, And they said, absolutely. Because I wanted to take my boxes up and down the quickest point from point A to point B without kind of making the walk of shame through the building with all your boxes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who knew. And I thought to myself, okay, I went to my office. Hadn't said anything to my family yet. Jim came in, shut the door, and he's like, look, I just really want you to know, hope, for the best for you. And I'm sorry. And I said, I understand it. It's okay. And then
he didn't offer you an interview for the job at the team store.
No.
Okay.
No. Then Kevin Meegank came in, and he's like, man, I'm really sorry. Let me know what I can do. I said, Kevin, don't worry about it, man. I said, you're a rising star, and let me know what I can do for you. And I will say that I reserved kind of that olive branch. That wasn't like I was throwing it out there to the whole building. Sure. Hey, call me anytime for anything you need. Yeah. But I did extend it to Kevin because he and I work closely together.
Good for you. Well, I mean, you're a classy guy to begin with, and you weren't gonna make a scene or do anything to disparage your 27 years there. Were you? You're
making me think of something else. Holy cow! I'd forgotten about this. Go ahead.
No, were you? I mean, what were you dreading? Were you dreading calling Amy? Were you dreading leaving the building? Like when you're in your office, you literally start packing your stuff?
I did, yeah.
Well, did they bring you boxes?
Yep.
It's not like
they brought,
so they had them ready?
I think when I talked to Chris or somebody said Rick Morrow in the mailroom, I got a bunch of boxes for you, which I needed. But going back, I won't say the name, but the prior weekend we had moved the rookies into apartments.
Okay.
They used to stay in a hotel, but we got them apartments so they would have their own room in case somebody snores or whatever. We thought that would, and it happened. It was over Mother's Day weekend. And we gave them these $10 laundry cards.
Okay.
So it covered the first $10 of their laundry. So they knew how to use it. Then they had to replenish it on their own.
Okay.
So one of the rookies' laundry cards didn't work, and I got a call late at night. What do we do? I said, I'll when I get there tomorrow, I'll make a call.
Real important stuff.
Yeah, there's nobody there in their office, but I'll get it taken care of. Right. And all of a sudden, so when I get fired, I went down. I talked to the trainers who I'd worked very closely with. It was Bud Carpenter, Chris Fischetti, Sean Gibson, Greg McMillan, and I let them know.
Sure.
They were like, oh my gosh, because they knew what I did for workers' comp.
Right.
I talked to Eric Ciano, Hal Luther, and the strength coach, the coaches. And then I on the way back up, this one person that had called me the night before, I said, I'll pop in and I'll talk to them. And I said, hey, and just, they let me go. And they were part of Rex's staff. And, oh man, I'm so sorry. It's tough. I'm going to miss you. And then they go, by the way, anything we could do about the laundry card for the rookies?
What is there?
It was my first real realization that I was like, no.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, sure.
Seriously?
I mean, two words come to mind, and I commend you in not uttering those two words. So nothing like missing, reading the room there.
Yeah. So I went to my office. I shut the door. I had some knocks. Julie Lantaff, some other Gail Zielinski came in. Tony Adio, and hey, I'm sorry. There were some hugs and.
Did you cry?
I didn't.
Were you in shock?
Yeah. It was kind of. It was kind of like watching yourself from above, like in Step Brothers when they say,
yeah.
And Josh,
yeah, I understand.
You've been and you're kind of numb and hypersensitized at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yep.
It's
Yeah, I walked into the door to the tight ends room and cut my eye. I was so I was such a daze. I was so out of it because you just don't see it coming. And then so how long are you in your office? An hour?
Before I go on, I think when we had your last day was early on when we were with Cover One. I encourage people to go back and to find that episode when
it's called You're Fired.
December. Go back and find it because
February 9th.
Oh, I'm sorry, February
2001.
Yeah, of course.
February 9th, 2001.
I would encourage listeners to go find it because some of the things you brought out were like so raw and livid and real. But so I made some trips up and downstairs. I talked to security. Bob Schatz I'd worked with for a long time, Marty McLaughlin, and sorry, buddy, the bummer, and hey, it's okay,
But it's one of those things in the NFL where you've said goodbye to hundreds of people, right? So as much as they're sorry for you, it's not like a company where maybe one person gets let go a year or something. Like you're cutting players all the time. So these are like genuine. I guess what I'm trying to say is these are genuine sentiments from these people, but it's not the same as like a company maybe you've worked for 27 years where there's the same 15 or 20 people and nobody gets let go.
Exactly.
Like it's kind of the wheels of the NFL keep churning, like with the $10 stupid laundry card. Like an hour after you're out of the building, it's almost like you were never there.
Yeah, no, you're right. They have to move on.
Right.
They're all moving on. And yes, they'll stay in contact to some degree, depending on who it is. But the one fortunate thing that happened is I was going down a corner of the office, again, exiting the building, having my car parked from a part that I didn't normally use. And I walked by this one office, and it was Len Vandenbos. Len Vandenbos was brought over from the Baltimore Ravens because he was sort of a coach. He was the team chaplain and part coach. Josh, when you attended the Call to Courage breakfast with us with Frank Reich, he and his wife were with the Bengals and player engagement that gave a great recollection of the Damar Hamlin night and how they handled it. So Len had no idea, and I had moved him in before. Actually, there were some funny circumstances that happened, and because he came in like late at night, and but so I knew him some, but I had lunch with him a few times. Quite honestly, he's probably not someone that I would have made a point to see. I didn't, in fact. I just walked by his office by chance, and he's like, hey, what's up? And I was tongue tied a little. I think he could tell something was wrong, and I was literally this was about to be the last time I would ever be in One Bills Drive building ever. And he's like, oh man, I'm sorry. He's like, come on in. He shut the door, and as a team chaplain, he said, I was part of this huge church in Chicago. All of a sudden one day the HR person came to me after all these years. They put a piece of paper in front of me saying, we're letting you go. And he said, I was not ready for it. And, but I ended up shortly after that working for the Chicago Bears in the NFL. He's like, so, as a team chaplain, his message was, God was already there for me. He'll be there for you. Here's a book that he gave me that was really helpful. And it was. And I kept in touch with Len afterwards and told him that I don't know how I would have felt walking out the building had it not been for that engagement with him, because it really kind of helped take the edge off for sure.
That's good.
Yeah. And so they had given me a special autograph from Brandon Beane. It was a letter that was basically I had to send back saying for my severance, to get my severance, I would have to agree not to say things publicly about the Bills, which is standard.
Yep. Okay.
And they just said, send it back within 72 hours. So I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the next day I'm like, I'm going to drive it back there. I just need to see how it's going to feel to go back to the scene of the crime. Yep. I know I can't go all the way back in the building. Yep. So I drive down. If anyone's ever been down One Bills Drive, there's that little guard shack. And I pull up, and the guard's like, "Oh man!" And my picture was on the wall, as these are the people that are been let go.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, that's just what happened. They're notified of people that are no longer with the organization.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's not like a wanted poster or something.
No. I understand. I understand.
So he was, oh man, I see that. I was notified. I'm so sorry. And I said, look, I've got this letter that has to get back to Barb Evans. It's signed. And he's like, oh, just go to I said, no. I can't. I shouldn't go back in the building. Can you just make sure you give it to her? He's like, absolutely. So I gave it to him. I did a U-turn around the building. I'm seeing One Bills Drive. And I'm like, before I did this, it was kind of a test for myself. Was I going to be bitter? Was I going to be sentimental? It was nothing.
Nothing.
I felt nothing. I felt nothing.
Numb.
Yep. And I was like, okay, I kind of passed that test. But going back to the day before, I get home. My oldest daughter was home.
So this is what time?
Maybe noon.
Which is really rare for you, right? Why are you home noon?
What are you doing
Tuesday?
home?
Right.
Yeah. So she was going to grad school after graduating from Edinburgh. She was at Canisius, but what's going on? I said, "I'll get right to it." They let me go. I said, "It's okay. I'm going to be paid for X amount of time." And wow, okay. I said, "It's okay." I said, "I had a great run." I said, "But Anna, how do I handle this with Claire, who was still in high school, or she was a senior in high school, or but more importantly, Mom was a teacher. She's a teacher,
the boss."
And so Claire came home shortly after. She handled it the exact same way. She's like, "Oh man, a bummer, but it's okay. I said, I'm gonna find something else to do. Do I call your mother?" And they're both like, "No, don't call her at school.
Sure,
don't call her at school. What's she gonna do?
Right?
Just wait and come home." So all three of my family members took it.
So
well, better than I thought.
Were you nervous to tell her? Not that you did anything wrong.
I was.
But there's a sense, like, I remember driving to my parents' house. I was 25, and I dreaded telling them.
I remember this
because you're embarrassed, not because you did anything wrong, but it's become your identity. You're Don Purdy. You're a dad. You're a husband. You're a son. You work for the Buffalo Bills. You're the director of football administration. Like, it's in the top 7 or 8 things that you'd say about yourself as a person, right?
Sure. And you're suddenly told you're no longer wanted there.
You're not. You're no longer wanted, and it's not as if it's not as if you can't do the job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as if you did anything wrong. It's not like you went 3-13 and you sucked. The fans weren't clamoring for you to leave.
Yeah.
You weren't asking for more money. They just decided that they just didn't want you anymore.
Yeah, and
that sucks.
Yeah, and I wasn't traded for a 4th round draft
right?
Because you told Lee Evans he was.
Right, they got nothing of value of letting you go. Nothing.
Right, except an opportunity for them to restructure the organization and have their own people, and that's kind of, you told, "Hey, if I'm ever a GM in a league, I'd like to have your." And look, they've done a great job. We were talking about the snowstorms that happened last year. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't have to deal with that. And
so when I guess I'm just curious, like. So you're sitting at home. You're waiting for Amy to get home from work to tell your wife that you've been let go of your job from the last 25 years. Yeah. You guys came to Buffalo for the Bills in a lot of respect.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you call your parents?
I did call my parents. Yeah, I let them know. They were just real quiet, and they took it in. I was going to be paid for a while, so it's okay. But they were kind of. You'd expect. Were you a little bitter, like you talked about your mom?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, they did your son. They did your son. Right. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, your parents are going to always be protective. Were you sad? Were you like, what were you feeling like when Amy comes home? Was it dread? Was it nervousness? Was it?
Yeah, I just wanted her to be okay with it. I didn't want to. I was okay with it for the most part. I still knew that I would have a lot of processing to do afterwards, and figuring things out. And I had already kind of had some plans about how I was going to play things out. But I just didn't want her to take it too badly. I mean, she was a full-time teacher, thankfully, full benefits. I mean,
because the last thing you want to do is feel like you let somebody down.
Exactly.
Like you have experienced this and you're hurting, but then you don't want to you don't want to let down your wife and your 2 daughters, because it just makes it's a multiplier, right? It just makes it feel worse.
It does. And they took it, and maybe I presented it to them in such a way that it was easy for them to take. I don't know, but one of the things that happened shortly after this, I didn't know how to tell family and friends, like, who should I call, who should I text, I'm not going to put anything on social media,
right?
Who should I email, like, who would, and I started, and
I didn't make the list, by the way. Go ahead.
We hadn't talked. Isn't that crazy?
Nope.
In all those years,
like
15 years or something like that.
I'll tell you the story about how I found out in a minute.
Yeah. So, I get my phone rings and it's a Chicago number, and I'm like, oh no. We had a coach on our staff that I knew was from Chicago, and he was high maintenance, and I just like, no. And I thought it was going to be a repeat of the situation we had with the laundry cart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I let it go to voicemail, and called again, and I let it go to voicemail, and finally I listened to the voicemail. It was Marv. He had heard, and he was done. And finally, I called him back. I said, "Marv, I'm so sorry. I
thought you were someone else."
I did. I told him. I said, I told him I thought it was someone, a Chicago number, that was another coach that I just, wasn't feeling dealing with anymore. And he's like, I'm so sorry. What happened? And he goes, I want you to know if you ever need anything. He goes, I really appreciate, everything you did when I was there, and anything you need, let me know. And Fran's here with me now, and she's really upset. And I want you to know that we're both just really thinking of you. And it was so nice. I couldn't get over it.
Did you break down? Because I think if Marv Levy would have called me to thank me for 25 years, I think I would have lost.
It was tough. I did. That was one of those things that I thought, man, how fortunate I am when I look back at my career and I had a Hall of Fame coach think enough to pick up the phone to call. Whatever happens going forward, like those are the things that you really value. And I hadn't thought about that in so long until we talked about this. But so time went on, and I thought I'm going to do one thing every day to make a connection with someone to try. It took about 2 weeks before I put something on Facebook.
Okay.
I kept crafting it and, making sure I didn't want to come across as whining or anything. Or
were you worried about like the NDA? Were you worried about what you said?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. Yeah, I don't blame you.
I was.
I don't blame you. You're getting paid. You're getting paid.
Right.
Right.
I didn't want to violate that.
Sure.
I didn't intend to either, but I didn't want to either, inadvertently do it. But I want to do one thing every day to make a connection to someone that might help me in a new chapter in my life. And I wanted to do one thing at home. I built a deck. I rebuilt the cabana, and I put up a new fence.
You were Daniel LaRusso in The Karate Kid,
exactly,
fixing up Mr. Miyagi's house, and not knowing that you were actually learning karate.
Well, you can solve the world when you're pounding nails and drilling screws.
That's funny.
You just it's mindless.
That's where your frustration and
every day. I didn't picture anyway. The time went by, and a couple things happened. The preseason, I didn't watch a single minute of preseason.
When did you get better?
I didn't know how the season was going to feel when the actual season came along. So I think I alluded to this before. When the opener was coming up, it was Saturday night, and Matt Warswick was one of the young guys that came over with Sean McDermott. So I called Matt on a Saturday before the opener to wish him the best. It was going to be his first time doing this. And I said, could you put me in Sean McDermott's voicemail? And I said, I want to talk to him. I said, I just want to leave him a word in his voicemail. He's like, absolutely, here you go. So I said, Sean, tomorrow when you walk out that tunnel, I just hope it's everything you've ever dreamt it would be, and you're going to have an amazing career. I just want you to know the time I spent working with you was special, and I'll be rooting for you. And that was it. I didn't know if he'd get it, when he'd get it. So it was Monday. I think it was Monday after the opener. In the afternoon, I'm out there pounding nails, drilling screws, and a 648-1800 number comes up, and I didn't recognize, had like a different 4 numbers at the end. Like, I'll answer it, whatever. And it was Sean. He's like, Don, I can't tell you how much that message meant. No matter what you do, he goes, you're going to do well. I really appreciate that. He goes, it pumped me up when I got that message on Sunday. And you made me think about it a little differently about, so thinking about the game itself, that I didn't taken time to consider what the experience might be like, but you maybe think about that. Thank you. And hey, and so, he would, on my birthday, the next few years, he would send me a quick message or whatever. Like, he didn't forget me. I saw him in the airport one time. Oh my gosh, how you doing? And just the fact that he would remember.
Did that help?
It did. It helped. It helped take some of the sting out of it. On the day of the home opener, I still had tickets.
Yeah.
And I was going to keep them. I was going to sell them and keep them and use them however. But I had promised my daughters that they could have the opener, and we didn't have parking passes anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Right. So they didn't know how they were going to feel, but they had told their friends they would go tailgate with them. So I said, I'll drive you. So we drive this back way through Orchard Park to California Road. Their friends were on California Road. I dropped them off on the left, go to California. I make a right on Southwestern. And there were, without exaggeration, there was 3-4 miles straight of cars coming
Mhm.
towards
You
the
were the
stadium.
only car
I
going the
was
other way.
the only car going the
Like-
other way.
It's like the Hurricane Hunter. That's the only car on the road going into New Orleans before the hurricane. Everybody else is getting out, right?
Gosh. Yeah.
So
and it
God,
was like,
that's got to
holy-
be.
It was tough. Like, wow.
And to put it in perspective for people, this is the first Bills home game that you were not attending since what, 1987?
88 as an intern.
So 30 seasons. When is it?
Something
And
like
you
that.
didn't even because
Yeah.
you had to be there early. You had never even been in traffic.
I wasn't there in 88. I wasn't there for
Okay.
the opener, but I was because I was an intern. But
But you weren't
89
even.
and
You
90
weren't even. You've
No.
never been in traffic.
No,
Because you'd always have to be there 3-4 hours before the game. Like,
Exactly.
traffic was never an issue.
I couldn't believe it.
So you were
I
the
couldn't
only.
believe
You
how
were
many
the.
cars there were.
You never really experienced the tailgate
No.
atmosphere. Like nothing.
I had a small taste of it once a year when I had friends come in October, and I would go out there for an hour and like,
Sure.
hey, this is really cool. But I
But
had to put on my dress clothes and go in. And but no, so that fan experience, I
what
wasn't.
was that ride home like?
That was tough. I'm like,
believe
wow,
you.
the whole world is going, and I'm going home. And so I went home and I mowed the lawn. And am I going to watch the game? I don't know. I watched it a little bit. I mowed the lawn because I could. And then Brad and Angela Lamb, our friends, were in town. Brad played for the team some, and he was invited back because they used that weekend to be a celebration of what it was, 25 years since the comeback game.
Yeah. Yep.
So he was there. He and Angela, we were going to pick them up after the game. They were going to come to our house for like pizza or something. And he called after the game and said, hey, we'll do whatever you want. But just so you know, I was talking to, I think it was Kay Hall and maybe some other former friends and relatives that were there from those teams, and said, we're all going to Ilio's. We have a room reserved. Would you want to go? And my first instinct was like, absolutely not. I'm not feeling this. I'm mowing the lawn, and I was not wanting to be social at all, and to quite honestly pretend that yay team.
Did they win?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. So, but for some reason, Amy and we said, you know what? Let's do it. Brad somehow convinced me. All right, let's give this a try. And so I went there, and we have this room, and I walk in, and it was Jim, it was Woody, and it was Eric Wood, and the trainers were all there, and I got a really nice reception. And then the four of us, Brad and Angela and Amy and I, were at this one table, and a lot of guys hadn't seen Brad in a while. Andre came over and, hey, oh my gosh, how you doing? And and they didn't want to say it's awkward when you talk to someone who's been let go. What do you say?
Right.
But they said just enough to make you feel like, put it this way, when it was said and done, I was glad I went, because it was part of the healing. I still had a long ways to go, as you and I have discussed, but that was actually helpful, something I hadn't intended to do. And I give my friends Brad and Angela a lot of credit for forcing me to do it.
You kind of jumped back in the pool at least a little bit, right? And you were able to see people who you had worked with, and it treated you normally, right? Like it's not like you were some kind of outcast.
Hey, we miss you. Just sitting here, something as simple as that.
It's like you think about you every single day. I mean, when the VP of administration tells you that at a Wendy's, when he's probably talked to you 4 times in your entire career, that's when you know you were a big deal. Sorry. Anyways, well, you set me up for that one. You didn't know you were doing it, but you did.
As soon as I started saying it, I knew I was setting you up for that.
Yeah. So I guess for people listening, and hopefully everybody's kind of enjoyed this.
That's funny.
Maybe you could just tell people how long did it take you? Like what's and it's still not. It'll never be what it was for you when it comes to this football team. And then it's never what it was for me either. You can never replicate working there. You just can't.
Here's right. But I got to north of 50-50 in a positive direction, but it was a process. The first couple of years, the first year, they make the playoffs. And thanks a lot, Andy Dalton. I'm like, seriously, this year?
Yeah, right.
Like,
I mean, you sat through like 15 years of of awfulness,
and I knew what it felt like. So did you, when to be part of playoff teams, Super Bowl teams, and man, I wanted to get.
Were you angry that night when that was New Year's Eve? The Andy Dalton to Tyler Boyd. Were you angry? Because you had every right to be angry.
I was bitter.
You'd be like, what the Like, come on.
I was bitter. I was. And I felt bad for my daughters and my future son-in-law, watching them celebrate. I'm like, good for you. And you've mentioned this too. Like, you wanted your boys and your family to have that experience. You didn't want your personal feelings.
That play that night did a lot for me because I watched Jody in the living room.
Right.
Tears.
Yeah.
Tears. And I'm like, I had gotten to the point where I wasn't actively rooting against them anymore, but I certainly was not cheering for them. I was really agnostic. It was like watching, for me, it was kind of like watching like the Saints against the Jaguars. Like, who cares?
For anyone here listening for the first time too, let me fast forward to the end. Josh and I are both like all in on the Bills, talking about them. But what you're bringing up is the process to get to that point.
Of course.
So for me, it was like 5 years. First couple of years where I didn't want to watch. I was rooting against them for the first couple of years, and then we got to like year 3,
and it's you're rooting against them, but you still love them.
Yeah, it's weird. So it's the people in the building you love.
Yes, it's kind of
messes with your head.
It's excuse my language. It's a mind fuck. It truly no, it is, because you're connected to this thing.
Yeah.
You especially, you gave 25 years of your professional career to this organization, which is everywhere around here. You live in West Seneca. You live 20 minutes from the stadium. Like, you can't get away from it. Unless you were going to move, you can't get away from it.
I used your reference so often, You
still didn't call me, but you used my reference.
I didn't have your number, I didn't think.
I'm just messing with you.
I give you credit for that, but you talk about you have a bitter parting of the ways with your wife or girlfriend, and everywhere you go, everyone's wearing pictures of her on their hats and T-shirts.
Yep. Your ex-wife made the playoffs. She's on network TV. Everybody's flying her flag. There's 80,000 people going to hear her speak. It's awful.
Yeah.
Like, it truly it had, and especially considering how bad they had been and how good they had gotten and around here, if they're good, you can't escape it.
Yeah. I kept yelling at myself, Don, don't just give in. Just don't you understand how much easier it would be for you if you just could? And I tried. And it took me a while. Year 3 was like, hey, you know what? I'm kind of just indifferent. Year 3, year 4. When we got into like 4 and 5, something happened to me where I felt, I don't know what it was. And I think Sean McDermott has a lot to do with this, but I just looked at the team. They were likable. There were still people there that I cared about. And I got to a point where at least here's maybe a good reference. Back in 2007, 2008, there was the outdoor hockey game. The Sabres played the Penguins.
I was at that game.
I was too.
Yep.
Jeez.
You didn't call me.
You didn't call me. And I was a Sabres fan, a casual fan. Admittedly, if they're in the playoffs, I get excited. But it was a great experience. They lost the game 2-1
in the shootout.
Sidney
Crosby,
Ryan Miller, Sidney Crosby, and I drove away from that game thinking that was a great experience. Oh man, I wish the Sabres would have won. Bummer they didn't. Well,
without
no
any
loss,
of
the baggage,
sleep.
right?
Yep.
I got to that point, like between year and year 3 of the 4 of the Bills, where wish they would have won, but it didn't hurt that it took this past year. The 13 seconds I was with my now in-laws family. So Anna married Tyler at the McTies. We were at their house. Their whole family was there. We watched that game, and that was the first time it hurt that the Bills lost. I started like, wow, okay, I'm there now. Not all the way as it was when you and I were working there, but there's that little feeling again to some degree.
Yes.
And now
it's interesting that for you was the spark or the realization that okay, I can cheer for this team.
Oh yeah.
And for the city. That you've been here most of your life,
and our family.
Your family,
they were zombies.
Your friend, right, and that's I felt very similar. I was sick to my stomach about that game when it was over.
Yeah,
and it was much more for everybody else around me than it was for me personally. But it was also like when they lost that Houston playoff game or the Jacksonville playoff game. I'm like, oh, good, well, at least this is over. But the 13 seconds game was it was the first time for me too. It felt like. after the Music City Miracle. Like, is that feeling in your stomach of, God, like I'm sick about it.
Yeah.
And
it hurt. Yep.
So where are you now?
Oh, I mean, I just keep building and growing on, especially a lot with this podcast. We've been talking to so many people that are mostly people that, were previously on the team, but to share in wherever they are in the country, how much they still hold dear. And like every player you talk to was some way, somehow told they were no longer wanted. Right. Now for them, it's different. Their physical window is such that they all know it, that you get to a certain point and someone younger than you is going to be better than you or cheaper than you.
Yep.
But they don't hold it against them. It's a little different in the front office, but I mean, doing this podcast has been incredible. Talking with you about it, and I feel like, I guess as close as I could be to just feeling like a normal fan, not a crazy fan,
sure,
but a fan that, let's go. It's great for all of us when they win, and it hurts when they lose.
Right.
And
so a couple of notes before we finish. Have you been to a game yet?
No, I'm going to give a shout out to, in 2017, our West Seneca West high school football team won the state championship. They played a game there. I went. It was like the Simpsons. The whole town of West Seneca was there. They ended up winning it in Syracuse on Thanksgiving. But a lot of the players, my wife Amy had taught in kindergarten and 6th grade, and we knew a lot of the coaches on the team, Rob Blairs, Matt Marinero, and so I went back to the stadium and had a good night. I saw Rick Morrow, and I felt that was that year. That was like, to be there to the scene of the crime at least helped a little bit. I have
Guns N' Roses there, right? Or didn't you go to a concert there?
I saw Metallica there last summer.
Metallica,
yeah.
Okay,
with my cousin Bob, and I was in the building one time, as I think I referenced last episode, where Jim Overdorf was a notary, and he invited me in. It was total randomness, but it was kind of neat to be there for a few minutes. But I have not been to a game
this year.
Maybe.
Like what are you actively not ready? Like what? Like I guess people might just be curious to know. When's the last time you sat in the stands and watched a Bills game?
Okay, going back to the time where I dropped my daughters off for the home opener, I had no idea traffic was that.
Yeah. Like it's an all-day experience.
Wow.
It's an all-day experience.
That doesn't look fun to me.
No, it's not.
The tailgating does.
I'm sure you could probably get comfortable seats, though. Like I
have tickets. I have tickets.
Okay, but I also think that you could probably find yourself in a comfortable area of the stadium if you so.
The tickets are good tickets,
Sure.
But I don't rule it out. But I realized one of the things after my post NFL experience is looking back retroactively, I experienced burnout, and I kind of like we talked to players about where they like to watch games, and I like doing that too.
Yeah,
but so I have no problem going back to a game, except I just haven't done it.
When's the last game you watched in the stands?
In the stands,
yeah.
I mean, sitting there for a whole game.
As a non-employee,
college.
So that was 1987,
something like that. Yeah,
that's crazy. So since 1987 college, is the last time that you attended a Bills game as a fan.
Now, right, as an employee, I had family and friends in the stands. I go visit them, be there for a while, but it wasn't buying a ticket
as a fan.
Right,
1987.
Yeah.
So like Jim Kelly's first or second year in the league is the last time you were a fan at a Bills game. Yeah, that's wild.
College, yeah.
Like that's just. I mean, there can't be that many people, that are in that situation. So I'm hoping that for the sake of Don and the sake of our podcast, that I'm able to convince him to go to a game this year. I think it would be fun to kind of document it if he feels comfortable doing that. I'm sure we can work around traffic. My wife and my two close friends go to every game.
A police escort, maybe.
You're the guy there, but I think it would be interesting material. I would love to watch you just walk around the concourse and just experience the game as a fan. It was eye-opening for me because
they don't drink or anything, do they?
No. Right. And then if we can get a couple drinks in you, then it's good. It was 17 or 18 years before I went back to a game.
Was that long?
It was that long.
And that was just the opener last year?
No, I went in 2019.
Oh, okay.
When they played the Bengals.
Interesting.
The Andy Dalton came back to the stadium, all that. But that is the first time I had been in the stadium other than the hockey game for 20 years.
Right.
So it's just this kind of eye-opening going there as a fan and just experiencing it that way. So hopefully, we'll be able to talk Don into that this fall. I hope everybody really enjoyed this episode. I know it was one that, personal, obviously, for our co-host here. We are going to do a part 3 of this where we're going to go back to the days of Bill Polian when Don was an intern and then, just starting out in the organization all the way through the hiring of Brandon Beane. And we're going to talk about all the different GMs, kind of the weird dynamics that happened, kind of unique in, I would say, NFL history. Some of the scenarios and the Hall of Fame coach coming back to be the GM, and then the marketing guy being the GM for a little bit, and one of the old scouts, and it's a really unique history of the last 30 years of Bill's GMs, right?
Yeah, you talk about GMs. Since leaving, I've stayed in some kind of contact with Brandon Beane. Couple phone calls here, or I ended up being with a startup company that I was asked to be a lead generator, and he was able to say, yeah, we'll talk to you, and still kind of leaves that door open. But I've had some good conversations with him, and the way he treats people around the building is, I like to hear.
That's good to know,
the way that he treats people around the building.
Because you would be an honest arbiter, and if you didn't like him, it would be very easy for you to say, yeah, I don't like the dude. So it's good that you giving him a thumbs up. It means quite a bit, because you would have every reason in the world to be a little bit bitter, and you're not. So that's a testament probably to how he is as a person.
He was good to me.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody likes and subscribes to the episode. This will air Thursday. On Sunday, we're going to have an interview with Lee Evans, who, third leading receiver in Bill's history, which I wasn't aware of.
In touchdowns and yards.
Right, which is pretty incredible. And then we'll be back, like I said, next week with part 3 of this. And then we're going to take some listener feedback and questions and anything you'd have for the two of us based upon these episodes we'd love to answer.
Sounds good.
Take care, everybody.
All right.